Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Aftermath series. Let us waste no time at all and dive right into this week's episode of Critical Role. So we start off with a rather intense conversation between Beauregard and Dyron. Now this was a meeting that Beauregard has been dreading for a while now, considering all of the choices her and the party have made. She felt that Dyron might be upset with her and she might potentially be exiled from the Cobalt Soul. But the conversation pretty much was just them exchanging information on what they've learned so far. Now, it was rather clear that Dyron is upset to an extent because of how Beauregard has been doing all of these things without telling her or without receiving orders to do so, but Dyron is still impressed nonetheless of what she's done so far. And now, I've mentioned this before on the previous times that Beau and Dyron have had conversations, but I just want to rehash it again. It's just so interesting seeing these two characters converse because of how similar they are. I love their dynamic, and I can definitely see where Beau gets her attitude from. However, what made this conversation particularly interesting from the other ones, it was clear in this one that there was sort of a power shift in the dynamic. Dyron is the mentor who has been, watching over Beau, and Beau has been seeking her advice and whatnot. But in this conversation, Dyron was the one that was in the dark about some of the things that have been going on, and Dyron was relying on Beau to get that information. The information that Dyron is particularly looking for is trying to find someone who's working with both sides, someone who maybe sold these beacons to the Empire, or someone that smuggled these beacons out to start a war. Dyron is simply trying to find the connections and what may have sparked this entire conflict, and she's trying to weed out any corruption that may be inside the dynasty, or even the Empire. Dyron is under the belief that someone of the Cerberus Assembly is working closely with the dynasty. Now, given that these beacons are the major point of this conflict, the only member of the Cerberus Assembly that I can really think of is Vesta Ragna, the Archmage of Antiquity. She seems to be the best candidate for wanting to acquire these antiques, these beacons of the Luxon. So as far as my theories go, my money is on Vess. Now, who the potential turncoat on the Dynasty side, I don't think we've met them yet. Out of the cast of Kreen operatives that we have seen, none of them really stick out, as Matt had said. But now, if acquiring these beacons was a secondary or primary goal, that doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is that the parties involved of the exchange of the beacons knew, or at least had to know, that a war would break out as a result. However, if the primary goal was to start a war, we can start looking at who benefits from wars, and maybe we can find out who the turncoats are in that regard. Obviously, weapon manufacturers and organizations heavily benefit from war. Otherwise, they're not making any money. Now, the only weapon manufacturers we know of is Professor Wako, and Dyron had also mentioned that airships are being developed in Hupperduke, so whatever organization is developing those may have a hand in the conflict. Now, this particular theory is a bit of a stretch, but I want to cast a wide net since we know so little about who these potential turncoats could be and who might be responsible for starting this conflict to begin with. But I think it is correct to potentially assume that weapon manufacturers may have a hand in this conflict. But now another interesting aspect of Beau and Dyron's conversation is that they were trying to plan how Dyron can fit into their new group, or at least in their house. Dyron simply suggested that she could be a ward over the house as the party travels northward. Now the interesting part is that Dyron was asking Beau what she wanted, what she thought was the best choice. And Beau clearly does not want to disappoint anyone. She seemed at a loss for words that Dyron was even asking her opinion, or desiring to go with Beau's choice on the matter. So it was kind of funny to see Beau sort of taken aback by this and feeling the pressure of having the decision lie on her. It was just Beau and Dyron in the room, and Beau was, looking to her sides, looking around, seeing if her friends were near to provide counsel or advice on the matter. But it was just Beau. It was up to her to decide what to do in that moment. But she ended up going with the neutral route and waiting till the morning so the entire party could discuss the matter at hand. But again, this whole conversation just showed so much character progression and growth in Beau. She's way more mature and more meticulous and methodical with her thinking and how she presents information. She's not so straightforward and clumsy with her delivery. Now, the party ultimately decided that Dyron would stay within the house. However, there are some concerns. It's possible that the party is constantly being watched, or at least being checked in on every now and then through magical means, but the party is just going to have to deal with that if it comes to fruition. But for now, Dyron will remain in the house as Caleb teleports the party to Nicodranus so that Yeza and Nott can reunite with their son, and Jester with her mother. And then we had an absolutely beautiful moment with the family reunion of Nott, Yeza, and Luke. Such a beautiful picture Matt painted in our heads as he described the scene of this wonderful reunion. Matt is just so gosh darn talented. And we had so many adorable family moments with them as well. Nott showed a side that we weren't quite used to. You know, we've seen this like reckless, carefree Nott, or the timid, stressed out Nott. But in this instance, we saw a more responsible and more laid back Nott. It was very obvious that she cares deeply about Luke and Yeza and their entire family relationship. It was interesting seeing this different motherly side to Nott. We have seen this side before, but it was more of like a nurturing kind. This one was more playful. But she also feels like she has to make up for her absence this past year. But nonetheless, it was very adorable to see their cute little family reunite once again, and to see Nott interact with Luke in various ways, showing him the crossbow, telling him she'll teach him how to use it, making sure he eats his vegetables, and then rewarding him with some crystals. I just love their whole family dynamic so much. It's so wholesome and so cute, and I definitely understand why Nott would want to stay. Nott and Caleb did have a conversation as the party went to the beach. Nott was saying how she's torn, how she wants to stay, but if she stays, she would have to tell Luke eventually about her goblin form. And also if she stays, because she's a goblin, she only has about 20-ish years to live. And so while Nott really does want to stay and be there for Luke, she ultimately has to leave. She has to find a way to return back to her normal self. And she's relying on Caleb to help her do so. And while Caleb is powerful, this spell, or what Nott wants, isn't in his arsenal yet. Now, Nott has talked about how powerful Caleb is, and this idea of how powerful Caleb is has floated around here and there. Now, I would think it would be totally awesome if Caleb tried to develop a spell to revert Nott to her original form, exactly as she was before. Sure, they may come across a spell through research purposes, but I personally would like to see Caleb create this spell. I think it would be an awesome character progression point, and it would lend towards the idea of how powerful Caleb is. But for now, Nott has decided to leave his family behind so that she may continue traveling with the group and hopefully fix this curse that she has been afflicted with. But before they return to Xhorhas, there's a few other things that I want to talk about. One of the other noteworthy things is that Jester had a conversation with her mother, and Jester expressed her desire to potentially just stay with her mother. But her mother obviously advised against this because she doesn't want Jester to be cooped up for the rest of her life. She wants her to be free and to experience the world. But it was just interesting to hear that from Jester, since she did seem to really care for the group and want to travel with them. And then lastly, the party did receive a package from Caliana. Caliana gave each of them a special gift and then wrote an overall letter to them, but then also a special letter for Caleb. The letter for Caleb was particularly heartwarming because it talked about everything that Caleb needed to hear. Caleb would go on and on about how the party is a bunch of assholes, how Caleb is a monster, but then Caliana tries to make him see a different side, how the party is good, how Caleb is good. They're all good people. And Caliana was basically telling Caleb to forgive himself for anything that he's done. And these are words that Caleb desperately needs to hear pretty much 24/7 because Caleb sees himself as a monster. Now, I'm sure many of us don't see Caleb as a monster, and a prime example of how he's not is just before the party was leaving. While Caleb was drawing the teleportation scroll, he called Luke, Yeza, and Nott over, and he sort of drew out this pattern where he drew circles under each of the family members and then lines connecting them, and was telling Luke that no matter where they are in the world, they will always be connected. Just a really cute moment as Caleb is teaching this young boy about magic and telling him that his mother will always be with him no matter where she is. Now, would a monster do that? I don't think so. And that whole moment was definitely one of my favorite parts of the whole episode. But with the teleportation circle complete, the party returned to Xhorhas, where they then introduced Dyron to Essek, and then Essek promptly teleported the party to the north, specifically in proximity to the volcano where the kiln resides. And that's where we were left off at the end of the episode. And so, with all of that being said, we are going to wrap up. Let me know all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions in this episode. I 100% loved the dynamic of Dyron and Bo and their whole conversation. I loved seeing all of the moments with Nott and her family. It was just so wholesome and adorable. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful rest of your weekend, and I will see you all next week.